Hey everyone. All right. So let's jump into our third little lecture of our second module. We've been talking about different narrative things. You've watched adaptation, and as we talked about in a previous lecture, most films follow this three-act structure, and as I keep emphasizing, that three-act structure is really all about character development, right? It's set up so that you can see the trajectory of the characters transitioning, transforming, into themselves, usually the protagonist, right? Um, and that's really one of the reasons why that narrative structure is so satisfying, at least with film. Television's kind of different. So today we're going to be talking about the characters themselves a little bit more and the different types of characters that you can see, and a little bit about how they fit in with all of this. And I'm also going to give you a little taste of some of the research that I do, which is um, not always directly related to this. It's a little bit more psychology focused of how all of this stuff sort of culminates into psychologically helping us enjoy different types of motion pictures, films, whatever. So, all right, so let's talk about some characters. Um, Protagonist and antagonist. We've already been using this word a lot, like as we've been talking about three-act structure and stuff like that. I feel fairly confident that you already know, like the protagonists are usually the good people, the people that we're rooting for. The antagonists are who we don't like. But what I do want you to understand too is that um, these don't necessarily have to be people. Oftentimes, especially with antagonists, like it might not be an antagonist in terms of like a villain. It could actually be an antagonistic force. So if you're, I don't know, oh, this is a weird one that comes to mind, even though you haven't seen it, I'm sure you know what it is. Like I was thinking the movie Twister, right? There were no, I mean, maybe I can't remember. Maybe there were some like scumbaggy type of characters there, but the main antagonist was like tornadoes. The characters didn't want to be hurt by tornadoes, and so it wasn't like a person. So a lot of times there could be something that is antagonizing the characters. It's not necessarily another human. I'd say adaptation kind of fits that bill, right? Because the antagonist wasn't, it wasn't like there was somebody against Charlie Kaufman. Well, until I guess he created human antagonists, with the characters, and then the alligator, which also wasn't a person, but you get the point. Really, the antagonist was like, you could say Charlie himself, perhaps, because he was his own worst enemy, those types of things, his writer's block, whatever. So those could all be antagonists. Another way to think about different types of characters and start to talk about the roles they play is there's flat characters and round characters. Um, Flat kind of has a negative connotation, but it shouldn't. All it really means is a flat character is less complex, and that also has a negative connotation, but it shouldn't. A flat character is more straight and narrow, right? A round character has more maybe edges. You're not complexity in terms of you're not necessarily maybe they're not as maybe they're not as self-assured or sure about who they are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good character or a bad character. And I mean by bad and good, I mean in terms of like interesting or not interesting, right? I think Superman is a lot more flat than Batman, for instance, and that's partially just because Batman is usually written with a lot more inner strife, those types of things, whereas Superman is seems more clear about like, what he's supposed to do and stuff. Um, Also, flat characters and round characters could be minor characters or they could be major characters. It doesn't necessarily determine what one is or not. Another interesting, oh, and you're gonna see more in a video on this too that will help you with your quiz, I think. Static and dynamic is related, but not the exact same. Remember, usually the three-act structure is there to support some sort of character transformation. So you expect some sort of dynamicism. You expect characters to be dynamic characters change. And so a lot of times The dynamic characters are going to be the ones that we're actually sort of following throughout the narrative. Static characters, all it means is like there's no change, there's no growth, for better or worse. It doesn't necessarily mean that they, are bad characters and they don't get better. It just means that they're not really the ones who are experiencing any sort of transformation. In my own research, we study dynamic characters as actually a vehicle for persuasion. We call them transitional characters. We're interested in how they can serve as role models. So if you see a character that, let's say, starts in one place, but then throughout a film starts to make better choices, maybe they start off, I don't know, throwing their life away by dating the wrong type of people. And then at the end of the rom-com, right, they've realized that they don't need people to be happy, or I don't know, whatever their transformation is. We look at those transitional characters, those dynamic characters, as characters that actually can send a message to the audience that maybe the audience will want to model that's better than a character that's always been doing the right thing. Because these characters show the audience how to change, not just what the goal is, right? And then another fun sort of category of characters is the anti-hero, which has become way more popular in the past decade or two, and especially the narratives we've been seeing on television. These are not clear protagonists or antagonists. I mean, technically, they're often positioned as protagonists. We're rooting for them, but the reason they're anti-heroes is because they're usually doing things that um, are not necessarily heroic, right? They make us question like why we're rooting for them because um, they clearly are characters that maybe we can identify with in some way, and yet they're doing a lot of things that we would never do ourselves, like Dexter, who, of course, is a serial killer. But again, in his, there's some moral justification for his actions that the show sets up for you. Um, and sorry, I skipped over the foil character thing. The other thing I wanted you to know is like a lot of times, and this is one way that you can, as we start talking about theme and things, one way that you can try to figure out maybe what a movie's trying to say to you or what theme it's trying to communicate is by looking at foil characters. A lot of times, characters are written in such a way that they're supposed to actually reflect the opposite of whatever character they're opposing. So the Joker would be in opposition to Batman, which is actually kind of an oversimplification, which you'll see in the video, but the idea is like one character has traits or some sort of qualities that actually are oh, and I don't know if you can see if I don't move my thing, um that draws attention, that highlights some sort of opposite or in a different character, right? So like it doesn't literally foil them, but it foils the idea of them. Okay, that's enough. Oh, I hope I put my little screen back on. Another video you're going to watch that's a supplement to this is about strong characters. And this video, like how to write a strong character, makes the argument that it boils down to um, making sure that your best characters have two things, wants and needs. And honestly, this is the type of thing, kind of like the three-act structure, that if you look back at all of the films that you already love, you can identify this with all of the characters that you really love in those films. So with Jurassic Park, and I think this might be mentioned in the video, um, you have Grant, right? So he's like this cranky guy who comes in and doesn't want to have anything to do with kids, and he just wants to um, hang out with dinosaurs and, Mac on Laura Dern's character and like all that stuff. Um, so his want, right, is just what is sort of driving him to be in Jurassic Park. It's his external journey. It's what he is trying to accomplish. It's being with the dinosaurs or whatever. But the need is really where that character transformation arc that we keep talking about comes in. It's that internal journey, it's the transformation we want to see, the subconscious struggles or lessons that the character needs to grow. And that in Jurassic Park is, him basically becoming kind of a father figure and learning to love children and like growing up and being an adult, right? So the wants are usually what sets the stage for what the movie's about. The needs, though, are what makes the movie really resonate with us. And there's going to be a ton more examples of, this sort of parallel character composition in that the supplemental video that you watch. But again, if you think back to all of the movies that have really left a mark on you, I bet if you think about the character, whether it's like Neo in the Matrix or whatever, it's like they're always fighting all of these external things, but deep down, it's really about what they need inside, right? So wants and needs. Um, and as I say here, in the best stories, they're really nicely interwoven. An adaptation, Charlie Kaufman wants like to write this like unique screenplay. He wants to get away from conventions. He wants to be, a special snowflake in the screenplay writing world. He wants to do justice to the novel. And all of those are good wants, and that's like sort of driving his conflict. But really, you see that he's like this neurotic man who really isn't very good at adapting to things. That's why he can't, have a good relationship with his girlfriend or have the career success he wants. He needs to be a little bit more like his brother, perhaps, a little bit, right? And to adapt and, compromise on some of those things that he needs. Or compromise on some of those things he wants, and that is like his needs. So that's like one way of looking at it. Okay, now we're going to do a slight change of pace here, but not exactly because it's still character related. So remember, I told you at the beginning, I want to talk to you a little bit about the psychology of narrative and how the things that the media psychologists, that's what we call ourselves, the people that are like me, how we study some of these narrative things to understand the psychology of why people enjoy some stories and not others. One of these theories is called affective disposition theory, and it is all about characters, and it's pretty simple and self-explanatory, but still listen closely. Basically, affective disposition theory, although it sounds complicated, is just saying that, when we watch things, and it could be a movie, but it could also be sports, we're always trying to size up like, okay, who's on my team and who's not on my team? Who am I rooting for and who am I opposed to? Right. And that's why, again, we can easily sort of we try to identify who's the protagonist here. Is it the serial killer or is the serial killer the villain, right? And then we also try to size up the villains, who's opposed to us. And affective disposition theory is just saying that, and our overall sense of enjoyment is derived from the people that we're rooting for succeeding and the people that we're not rooting for not succeeding. If the good guys win, yay. If the bad guys win, boo. If the good guys, or even so, if the bad guys lose, yay, right? It's more enjoyable. And like I said, you can see how this relates to sports, right? I mean, it is kind of um, intuitive in a way that like it's a lot more fun when your team wins. And it's sometimes even more fun when who's not your team loses, right? All of those things like contribute to enjoyment. So it works the same way with characters. But there's some interesting questions, of course, about like, well, wait a second, then why do we like anti-heroes? Why do we like watching these like bad people who win? And it is more complicated. I don't want to oversimplify it. I'm just giving you a little teaser here. But there's a lot of theories about how I mentioned before, when you position bad people as the protagonist, though, we can just morally disengage and pretend like they're the good guy, essentially, right? So that's the idea of moral disengagement. It's like, I know we have these morals, but because we're watching media and because we're being sort of, quote, told that this person is justified, we can sort of suspend our morality, in order to root for them. And enjoyment still works in the same way. So affective disposition theory does work for even for morally ambiguous characters. Another fun, well, I think it's fun, psychological theory of narrative enjoyment is called excitation transfer theory. This chart makes it look super complicated, but it's really not. In fact, think about that three act structure. Remember how like it was like, oh, yeah, we just start the build up and then there's a bunch of conflict and then at the end there's an exciting revolution. Well, picture if we like put that, like we sort of superimpose that over what we have here and think about how we're probably experiencing different emotions during all of this. So, emotional arousal is kind of like how excited we are, like how intense the emotion is. And valence is basically like how positive or negative it is. So, thinking at the beginning, so in the three act structure down here, um, yeah, okay, at the beginning we're not feeling a lot, but as the suspense increases, right? So going into the two act structure where we have all of that conflict for most of the movie, it's like rising action. It's like kind of putting us on the edge of our seat because it's just like, gosh, it's a whole lot of conflict. That's why we watch these things. Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting at all, right? And then it culminates in, in that third act to this climax and then some sort of resolution. And all of a sudden, we go from this negative emotion of suspense into this positive emotion when there's some sort of happy ending, right? When everything gets resolved. And excitation transfer theory says that the arousal, all of that excitation that we had when we experienced those negative emotions during the suspense, it transfers to the positive emotion that we feel in the third act when everything is resolved. So it's sort of like we get like all these kicks, we get all worked up, and then all of that like energy gets put on a positive emotion at the end. But of course, that raises the question of like, well, how does it explain why we would enjoy things that don't end happy? Like sometimes we watch movies and it doesn't have like a satis or a happy ending. So what happened? Like, why would we do that if that's not enjoyable? And actually, I tell you what, I'm just going to skip this to get it. Although it's very interesting, but I think I skipped the questions for that in your quiz, so we're safe. Well, so back to the question though, it's like, yeah, so okay, if we only enjoy things that have like happy endings, like affective disposition theory and excitation transfer theory, then why would we watch all this downer crap about Holocaust and death and like, you know what I mean? It's just like, why would we watch things that we know? Because we know with tearjerkers and stuff, sometimes it's going to end poorly. Well, the truth is, and it relates beautifully to this class. It's a wonderful way to end this lecture on. Um, we're not always out for this idea of hedonic enjoyment. Hedonic enjoyment is like fun, happy. I just want to feel good, right? That's hedonism. And a lot of times that is why we're watching moving images, films, television, whatever. But it's important to know that hedonic enjoyment is not always the goal. There's also this idea, opposite of hedonism, of eudaimonia. Well, I wouldn't say opposite, but it's a different type of enjoyment. It is associated with the A word, appreciation, which is what this class is about, meaning it's not always about having a good time. Sometimes it's about having a meaningful experience or being able to appreciate what went into something or what something saying about something. So it's sort of like it's somewhat pleasurable, but it could also be associated with negative emotions. I could watch Schindler's List and um, learn a lot about the Holocaust and really appreciate what people went through and also appreciate the elements of good storytelling and all of these things. It's not necessarily going to make me feel good to watch Schindler's List, but I can get some hedonic, sorry, so sorry, I could get some eudaimonic appreciation from the experience. So and asking questions about the psychology of like, well, why do people watch things? It's always important to remember that enjoyment is one thing that we're looking for, but appreciation or eudaimonia is something else that we're looking for. And again, hopefully this class will help you with a little bit more of that eudaimonic stuff, even if you can't always get the hedonic enjoyment, like with adaptation. But I really hope some of you loved adaptation because I get both out of that movie. So, okay, until next time. Bye.